Today, I'm talking with renowned author, journalist, wine educator, speaker, and consultant Karen MacNeil, who has won many hearts and minds over with her single best-selling wine book, The Wine Bible. It is hands down my favorite wine book. I encourage anyone with the slightest interest in wine to buy a copy. It is available on our marketplace at corvin.com. Welcome, Karen. How are things in Napa Valley?
Oh, it's beautiful today. All the vines are getting ready to grow, and it's just a gorgeous day.
That's awesome. What phase are the grapes in right now?
They're still dormant, actually,
Okay.
but it's been warm for a couple of weeks now, even though it's February. So
Yeah.
starting, I guess it's March today. Starting by the end of this month, they should start waking up and beginning to bud out, which is always a beautiful time in the Napa Valley.
It feels like spring is coming, that's for sure. Did you have a feeling the Wine Bible would become such a big deal when you were first writing it, the first version of it?
No, absolutely not. In fact, the first print run of the Wine Bible was something like 8,000 copies. And I actually said to the publisher, don't publish that. I mean, don't print that many. I only have like 25 friends. I mean, I really, the first one took 10 years,
Wow.
but not 10 unpaid years. But I did not for 1 minute believe that I would ever sell so many. It sold over 1 million copies. And I didn't do it to make any money. It was a labor of love all those years.
Yeah, you can read that. You can feel that when you read it, that it is definitely a labor of love. So you do have some playful analogies in the book. So I have to ask, if you were a wine, what wine would you be?
Oh my God, I don't
know. Has no one ever asked you this?
Yeah, people have asked me that.
Okay.
And I sometimes think, I'd be Riesling, because I'm like German Riesling, because I'm so precise. And I'm maniacal as a researcher. I really, any wine fact in the world, I'm willing to spend months to hunt down the answer. But then I think, no, I'm not that. I'm not, so taught, I guess.
It's the most noble varietal.
Yeah, it
right?
is the most noble variety. Yeah, and then I think, no, I'm kind of more like Pinot Noir, and I don't know, just have all secrets, I guess. Or maybe I could be some kind of a big, some kind of a blend. I could take the best of Pinot Noir, the best of Cabernet, the best of Riesling,
Absolutely.
Put them all together. Maybe that's it.
I love that. So you're constantly tasting wines. What's the wine or wine region that's most surprised you lately?
Well, the biggest surprise of all was that before COVID kind of, stopped all of us from traveling, the last place that I had traveled to, the last wine region, was also the most remote wine region I've ever been in, which was in the Himalayas.
Oh, wow.
And Chinese wine regions in general are shocking. I mean, Ningxia, which is sort of the Napa Valley of China, is on the cusp of the Gobi Desert. You take 3 planes into central China to even get there. So those, places where wine has never existed before, as we know it anyway, grape-based wine, are just shocking. They're hard to believe.
Yeah, a recent issue of the Wine Enthusiast, they were talking about Norway and Bolivia as like couple future very groundbreaking regions. So
yeah,
it's definitely there's going to be some interesting regions on the horizon to look out for.
One of the interesting things about that, Lindsay, is that in the 1950s, if you look at, I wasn't writing in the 1950s, but You know, I've looked at a lot of wine books that have been published since wine books did begin to be published, mostly in the 1800s. So by the 1950s, though, even books that have the title like Wines of the World are essentially about two countries, France and Germany. France and Germany were considered the two greatest wine producers, and every other, Italy and Spain, were considered peasant wine kind of regions. California, if it got even a paragraph in a book in the 1950s, it was surprising. It was often, the United States wouldn't have been written about at all. South America, forget it, nothing about Australia or New Zealand. So the world of wine, I mean, we kind of forget this, but the world of wine during our lifetimes have, or at least within the last two generations, has gotten enormous. I mean, it was unthinkable, even as of 1950, that a place like China would ever produce wine.
Wow. So what grapes are they growing in that region that you
Mostly
visited?
Cabernet.
Okay.
Yep, Cabernet and some Cabernet Franc, a little bit of Merlot. There are producers who make Chardonnay as well, but the Chinese love red wine, and they don't really like cold beverages either. So you never see like a really crisp white wine. Even white wines, they tend to serve not cold.
Oh, that's interesting. So Bordeaux varietals, heavy and
Bordeaux
Bordeaux
varieties.
varietals.
Yeah.
So it's a warmer region, or?
It is a warm region. Well, Ningxia on the cusp of the Gobi Desert is a warm region, and that's why it does so well with Cabernet and Bordeaux varieties. In the Himalayas, it's pretty cold,
Yeah.
especially at night.
Yeah.
But during the day, you get this intense luminosity because you're 8,000 feet in elevation.
Wow.
I mean, you can barely, you know, in a steep vineyard, you're just sort of like huffing and puffing because the oxygen, there's so little oxygen at that altitude.
Oh, that's interesting.
Stunning.
That's really interesting. I was in India like 15 years ago or something like that. And I remember having some Indian wine from the Sula vineyard,
Yes.
you know, and it was pretty good, you know, like it wasn't anything to write home about, but it's interesting. You don't think of wine coming from these regions in Asia for sure, but they're becoming bigger consumers of wine now. So that makes sense, right?
Definitely.
So how has the wine industry changed for the better or worse in the past 10 plus years?
Well, if I can go back a little further, I would say that the United States really has a wine culture now. Even 30 years ago, there were kind of bad jokes about being able to get a really good wine in New York and Los Angeles and San Francisco, but the great middle of the country was a big flyover zone.
Right.
And that's no longer true, right? There are great wine bars and restaurants with fabulous wine lists throughout the whole country. And maybe we forget that just wasn't the case 30 years ago.
Right.
Also, even 20 years ago, someone like me could know I felt like I knew almost everybody in the wine industry. I mean, it was a much smaller industry. And in New York City, when I began, there were maybe 3 women in the entire wine industry. And that has certainly changed. There not only is it a bigger industry and much more exciting, and it's kind of followed the food trend, in not trend, but the emergence of a really sophisticated American cuisine. And now, it's wonderful for America to have a wine culture, and for so many of the people who are involved in it are, of course, women such as yourself, young women.
Yeah. So what do you think the catalyst has been for the change, the emergence or evolution of the culture, the wine culture in the last 20 plus years?
Yeah, you know, I think when it's certainly grown slowly and I think organically, because, you know, once you kind of fall in love with wine, it's so interesting, right? People describe the moment when they were just transformed by some fantastic wine.
Mhm.
But nobody ever says, and then a few years later, I just fell out of love with wine. Like, forget it. Never, you know, I'm moving on,
Really
right?
good point. Yeah.
Yeah, nobody
It's not
falls
a
out,
fad.
right? Nobody falls out of love with it. They
That's
just
true.
get in kind of deeper and deeper and deeper. And then they tell their friends. And then every time someone comes over, instead of, I don't know, a scotch or a beer, you want to show them, look at this great Chilean wine I just found.
Right.
So I think it grew by virtue of a core group of people who had a real passion for Europe and European wine, and who kept, you know, each one of those people told 10 people, and those 10 people told 10 people. And it grew very, very naturally in that way.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I mean, even, you know, I started in the wine business 13 years, 14 years ago, 15 years ago. And it's amazing how it's just wine has just become a much more ubiquitous part of the culture, you know, and like you said, like young people, even we can see in our market research studies for at Corvin is that it's shifting way more millennial, like our consumer base. So I think there's and people seem to be people's tastes seem to be improving too. It
Yeah,
seems
well,
with the
it's
evolution.
no, it is true. I mean, back to the 1950s for a
Right.
minute, you know, it was Wonder Bread, bad coffee,
Mm.
Velveeta cheese. I mean, it was just, you know, terrible culinary world, and pretty basic when it came, you know,
Right.
Liebfraumilch Milch and Matus and Lancers. And actually, you know, the people who, even people born in the 60s, were maybe the very first people who had parents who drank wine.
Hmm.
Most people before that had parents who were spirits drinkers. So we're now seeing, I mean, millennials today often, who are wine drinkers, often have parents who were wine drinkers. But those people's parents were not wine drinkers.
Right.
Those people's parents were hardcore spirits drinkers. Well,
Right.
maybe not hardcore, but hard.
That was their main beverage of
Yeah.
choice. Um, so switching gears a little bit, you have a new glassware line. Can you talk about that a little bit and your inspiration behind it?
Yeah, it's so exciting. It's called Flavor First. And you know, one day I found myself thinking about how in the wine business, in wine, sometimes you have to know something in order to know something. So, for example, and I was thinking about glasses, how glasses are named for wine regions, the Burgundy glass, the Bordeaux glass, or they're named for varieties. Here's the Sangiovese glass, the Chardonnay glass, the Tempranillo glass. And I thought, gosh, you know, I mean, how many people, if you walked out on the street of the Napa Valley right now and you said, here's a microphone, talking to the microphone, explain the difference between Sangiovese and Tempranillo, I think most people would be like, let me see.
Yeah.
and, and, and here's a map of France, you know, put a thumbtack in Burgundy.
Right.
A lot of people couldn't do that. And so as I was thinking about the irrationality of how wine glasses are, I thought, why couldn't you just have a wine glass be based on flavor?
Mm-hmm.
Because flavor is something everybody understands, and everybody knows what kind of flavor they like. They may
Right.
not be able to put fine Burgundy on a map, but they certainly know what kind of flavor they like. So then came the real hard part, because the next 3 years I spent thinking about, well, if you could design glasses around flavor, what flavors would those be?
Mm-hmm.
And how many glasses would you have? And I knew one glass wasn't going to get it, or going to do it. But also I didn't, you know, who needs 17 different sizes and shapes of glasses? That's starting to get really crazy and untenable.
Right.
So I began to think about all the students who I have taught over the years, mostly at the Culinary Institute of America in Napa, adult professionals. And when you ask people, what kind of wine do you like? You know, they usually say something very simple. I like bold reds, or I like fresh wines, or I like creamy wines. They say something very simple. So in my experiments, I began to think about this idea, and indeed, the three prototypes I hand drew with colored pencils, and that Oneida, my business partner in this venture, made into prototypes and then manufactured as crystalline glasses. Um, the the three glasses are called Fresh and Crisp, Creamy and Silky, and Bold and Powerful. And with those three glasses, you can, that's going to cover you for 99.9% of all the wines you might drink.
Wow.
So it
That's
makes
cool.
it really easy. Yeah.
So how did the shapes differ for the glassware?
So this is the crisp and fresh glass, and you can see it's going to look a lot larger because I'm holding it close to
Oh, the bulb's at the
camera,
top.
though.
The bulb is like
Yeah,
oriented to the top. That's interesting.
exactly. The widest part of the glass is at the top. And when you drink a really crisp and fresh wine like Sauvignon Blanc or Riesling or Pinot Grigio or Rosé or Champagne or Prosecco out of this glass, it's astounding. I don't know what's happening scientifically. And actually, no glass manufacturer knows what's happening scientifically.
Yeah.
All one can know is empirically, experientially, from tasting 2,000 wines a year and trying them in different glasses, that somehow oxygen is having a profound effect on the wine by virtue of the shape of the glass.
Right.
And the bold and powerful glass is just the opposite. The widest part of the glass is in the lower quadrant of the bowl. And that's maximizing the amount of surface area of wine in contact with oxygen.
Right.
And for some reason, that really opens up a wine and makes it taste a lot more generous. And right in the middle is the creamy and silky glass, which is a perfect egg shape. And this glass is really a mystery to me. But it's like concrete tanks that winemakers use. No one knows why that egg shape is so harmonious. I mean, why are eggs egg-shaped even, right? I don't know.
Never thought about that.
Something's operating. We just
Yeah.
don't know what it is. Yeah.
Well, they're beautiful. And I look forward to hopefully, at some point we'll hopefully be selling those on the marketplace as well.
Absolutely.
They're beautiful glasses. Now I have to ask you, what's on the docket for you travel-wise post-pandemic?
Yeah, when last March, when people began to get very nervous, me too, about traveling, I was supposed to go. I had my tickets for Rioja, Sicily, and the Republic of Georgia.
Oh,
I mean,
wow.
These were separate trips, but
wow.
About a month apart. And so I was just heartbroken.
That's
still, I haven't even gone to San Francisco, which is 2 hours away.
Oh, wow.
So I'm hoping to go to Rioja, Sicily, and the Republic of Georgia, and throw in Croatia in there as well, because Croatia is really up and coming as a wine place. It's also beautiful for sailing. And the Republic of Georgia is just one of the most ancient wine cultures. I'm really dying to go there.
So you've never been?
I haven't been to Georgia. I've been to Croatia and Sicily and Rioja, but I've never been to Georgia, not yet anyway.
And that's supposedly where wine began, right? They say in Georgia.
It's one of the places.
Okay.
One of the early domestication sites, somewhere in the Caucasus, mountains near Georgia, near Armenia, what is today Armenia,
Okay.
Eastern Turkey. These were all really important sites of the early domestication of wine.
Okay. And what are they making today in Georgia? Or what grapes are they growing?
One of the best grapes is called Arini, Areni. It's
Okay.
quite a delicious red. There's also some sparkling wine made in, especially in Armenia, that is absolutely fantastic. I this a bottle of this was sent to my office a few months ago, and I thought, oh my goodness, I can't even imagine. But California winemakers are going to places like Georgia and Armenia and forming joint ventures and
Wow.
producing some pretty incredible wines.
That's amazing. And land must be less expensive there than it is in Napa, I imagine.
Yeah, well, Napa is, now between
Prohibitive.
$500,000 and $750,000 an acre. And of
Wow.
course, you can't have 1 acre. That won't make very much wine.
Right.
But land prices in Napa Valley have just risen astronomically. I mean,
Yeah.
if you had been, I don't know, smart about it in 1970.
Some foresight, yeah.
Yeah, and you could have dropped out of high school, bought a few acres of land for $1,000 an acre, and now sold them for $500,000 30 years later.
Oh man, if only we could tell the future. So our company mission at Corvin is to change the way the world experiences wine. I know you've had many wine experiences, but can you tell us about a favorite wine experience that you've had?
For me, wine can never be kind of divorced from the culture in which it exists. And so the very best wine experiences are very threaded into the culture, which is why travel is so important. When I was writing the second edition of the Wine Bible, my editor happened to call me and she said, "Where are you, by the way?" And I said, "I'm in Argentina." And she said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm writing this article. But right at the moment, I'm learning how to tango." And she laughed and she said, "Oh, come on, what has that got to do with wine?" And I said, "I don't think you can understand Argentine Malbec unless you understand how to tango." Or some
That's
little quip like
amazing.
that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But the truth is that there is some truth in those kinds of things.
Yeah.
That it's why people love Italy so much, because it's really easy to fold yourself into that fantastic culture that they have. And then every wine tastes just a little bit more delicious when you're at the same time rolling out the ravioli by hand, or I don't know, eating pizza with tomato sauce dripping down your chin, or whatever it is. So I have a lot of those because I've been to most wine regions in the world, and that's what I always want to do. I want to really be, if I'm in Austria researching wine, I also want to go waltz somewhere or something, just like the Austrians would.
And immerse yourself. Do you still tango today?
I mean, I could probably badly do it, and I wouldn't want anyone to be looking.
We won't put you on the spot today.
No. Yeah, I'll have to turn the Zoom call off. Just listen to the music.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. I love that. So I know you're hard at work on the third version of the Wine Bible. So maybe just tease us with any additions or things to come in that version.
Yeah, well, it will be the biggest one yet. And I mean, bigger isn't necessarily better, right? But You know, I think the Wine Bible does cover the world, and the world of wine, as we were just saying, is an expanding place. But I think what makes that book so, makes people really like it is the ability to describe complicated scientific ideas in kind of the plain English that any reasonably intelligent person would understand.
Yep.
And it's surprising that a lot of wine books are written by subject experts. They know their subject, but they're not necessarily good teachers or writers of that subject. And I work really hard at both being a good teacher and a good writer. So I think what makes Wine Bible 3, the third edition, what will make it even better than 2, of which I was proud, but what will make it even better is that I think I've gotten better even at describing very complicated ideas in a breezy way that respects the intellectualism of the idea, but that doesn't overcomplicate it in a sense. It's a hard thing to do, actually. Yeah. Talk to any winemaker, right? You realize after about a paragraph, they're talking a different language than you're talking.
Right, right. And to write without pretense, right? You're not so much trying to impress the reader, but you're trying to get the message across. And I always, as I've told you, I've been a big fan of the book for a long time. It was the first book that I sold when I was managing the bestsellers wine stores in Boston, and that was the only book that we sold. But I always loved it, so I encourage everybody to get a copy. The third version should be out later this year, this summer.
Right? No, I think the third edition will be out in 2022.
Sorry.
I'm just finishing it, but then it takes the publisher about a year and a half. So the second edition, Corrivan is selling now, which is great. It's what everybody's buying. Yep. So don't wait a year and a half.
No, absolutely not. Right. Absolutely not. Get the second edition at corrivan.com. And always a pleasure talking with you, Karen. And I hope everybody checks out the Wine Bible. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Lindsay. Thank you.